That's the whole point of it. Make the assessment worthwhile for your students' time, for your time, to give you data that's going to further your instruction to help your students move. If it's not going to do that, then don't waste your time. Hey everyone, welcome for another episode in Adventures of Comprehension. My name is Ciera Harris, and I am the author behind Ciera Harris Teaching. If you haven't done so already, make sure to drop me a comment below and let me know you're here. Make sure to say hi. Let me know where you're from and what grade you teach. So tonight, I have 6 different components for us to analyze and break down to truly help all of our kids. All right, so here we go. You're going to love this. So number 1, my very first tip when identifying students' needs is to be aware of your text. Be absolutely aware of what's going on. So this is hard for many teachers to do, and here's why. We, as adults, especially as teachers, we're very avid readers. We are considered fluent, strong. We have an adult reading brain, which is very different from a child's reading brain, right? We know this. But what happens is when we read a text, especially a text that's at a child's level, the guided reading books we put in front of them, a picture book we're reading to them, even a novel, we're using our adult brain to comprehend the text. We're not using a student's brain. So what we need to do is we need to try to put ourselves in our students' shoes. And I think this is a great practice for teachers to do multiple times a year, every year. It's great for professional development. It's great to do just on your own when you're lesson planning, whatever you need to do to kind of empathize with where your students are coming from when it comes to how are they reading the text, what, impasses and what, holes or hills are they going to have to overcome when they're reading. So what we need to do is as teachers, we need to slow our reading down. We need to slow down our reading. We need to even more slow down our thinking and put yourself in the student's shoes. What are they thinking? What type of thinking is needed in order for them to comprehend? We may not pick up on the fact that, they may, not get this inference, or they may not realize what this piece of figurative language means, but we use it all the time, so it just kind of flew in one ear and out the other, and we didn't even realize it was there. They may not realize that this is an important detail that is going to need to be connected to something way later on in the story, so they may not pick up on the fact that it's important, and we may pick up on that because, we know where the story is going. Just different things here or there that we as an adult readers, we just kind of go with the flow. And children, when they are learning to read, they're going to have different hiccups than clearly we do as adult readers. So in order to best identify students' needs when reading is to kind of almost pre-identify those needs when it comes to reading the text. So I always make sure anytime I'm giving my students any kind of text, whether it be, a guided reading book or passage, whether it be a picture book that we're reading, maybe it's a novel that we're reading, maybe it's just, a passage that I found on the internet and we're reading it together for whatever reason. I always pre-read my text. It is so important to do it. And yes, it means it takes time, but we have to pre-read in order to do this. We have to make sure that we are looking through and evaluating the text to figure out where are our students' misconceptions going to be. I can't read this as an adult. I need to read this as a current 2nd grader, a current 3rd grader. I need to see where they may have trouble and where my support then might need to be. I can read this and think of it, as a child reading it. And I know that I'm going to have students A, B, and C worry, kind of struggle in this section of the text, but I'm going to have students, X, Y, and Z, they're going to struggle with this section of the text. So then I can kind of prep my questioning tactics on who I'm going to call on to answer certain questions and what kind of questions I'm going to ask based on what's kind of happening in the story and what support is needed. So something as simple as being aware of the text we are giving our students and pre-reading that and really thinking about our students, their needs, their hiccups, their possible misconceptions, and pairing all of this together. And all of this just happens while reading a text, which is something we should be doing anyways, right? So being aware of the text is one of the most important and easy steps that we can do as teachers to truly help identify our students' needs when teaching. We're going to keep on going, and we are ready for idea number 2 to help identify students' needs when teaching. And this is to make sure that we understand how all of our reading skills, all of our strategies, all of our standards, all the stuff, right, that we teach, we need to make sure how all of that stuff interacts, connects, and supports each other. So every skill that we teach has a broken down list of prerequisites that support it that may actually end up being the cause of a misconception for one of your students. So we need to make sure as teachers that we fully understand the scope, the sequence, and even more so the connections between all of our skills, all of our strategies, and all of our standards to know where those connections are being made. For example, I know main idea is a huge standard in almost every grade in elementary school. And I know it's really important that this is something that we teach. But what I've seen many times is teachers teaching main idea over and over and over again because they have students who just don't get it. And they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to reteach and make sure they're supporting their students who are struggling. And that's fantastic. But what may be happening is it may not be main idea that they don't understand. We need to understand, what does main idea truly consist of? What other steps, skills, what other pieces or types of thinking may need to be happening in the student's brain in order for them to identify the main idea? And they could be missing one of those. I highly recommend schools and teachers take a day for professional development and really work on decomposing their standards. Look at your state standards. Look at the specific ones that are, considered your high priority skills or standards, and break those down. If you have standard, and I'm just throwing out a random, RL1, whatever that is, what does that truly mean? What prerequisites are included in that standard? What vocabulary do students need to know? What misconceptions might students have in order for them not to get that standard? Take a day and decompose all of your standards specifically for reading comprehension so you really are able to best identify your students' needs. So when they come to RL1 and they're not getting it, it may not be RL1. It may be other pieces that if you don't understand that standard truly, it may be other pieces that you're not addressing, so then they're never going to truly get RL1. We are ready for number 3. Number 3 is to make sure that we are using both open and closed questions when we are interacting with our students. Specifically, of course, for reading comprehension. And here's why. So getting to know students' areas of needs depends on the types of questions that we're asking. So closed questions, which are questions that are multiple choice, they have one right answer, those really don't give us a lot of information. They basically tell us whether a student can guess correctly or they can deduce based on given choices. So yeah, that's an important skill, but when it comes to really wanting good data to be able to help support our students, closed questions really don't do it justice. Now, open questions, those allow for total transparency. It's basically asking an open question that could have potentially more than one right answer, or also require a lot more thinking, a lot more components, pieces, evidence, just more critical thinking, right? And not only can we see in an open question that we ask if a student has the right answer, we can also see the variations of depth that are given within that answer. So did they give just a bare minimum answer? Okay. Did they just answer the question in like one sentence? They may have it right, they may have it wrong. Or did they support it with evidence? Did they take their answer and go beyond the text and into their own world and make connections based on, what they've taken away from the story? So if we aren't asking the right kinds of questions, then we're not going to get the right kind of data to be able to identify my students' needs. You want to ask the questions that don't get the hands raised in the air. Because if you really think about it, when we ask questions and all of our students raise their hands, we may have a sense of pride and excitement that, one, they're all engaged, which is great. And two, they all know the answer. They all think they know the answer, but they all know the answer. That's fantastic. Then why are we wasting our time with those questions? Ask the questions that are going to make your students stop and think. Look at the text. Dig into the text. Want to talk to their neighbor to figure out, what does their neighbor think? What opinions do they have on this question? And how does that impact my thinking and understanding? All right, we're still on questioning. We're going to move into number 4, which is to use tiered questions. Tiered questions is a really great strategy to use to see where students' misconceptions lie. So I like to give the visual of an upside down triangle when it comes to tiered questions. So, bigger at the top, smaller point at the bottom. So, tiered questions basically works like this. It helps us as teachers get to the root of the problem. So when a student gives an incorrect answer, we use tiered questioning strategy to help back them up. We're supporting them by, instead of moving on to somebody else who knows the answer, we're supporting them by breaking down the question that I just asked into a smaller, more pinpointed question, okay? So it's basically breaking down the main question that I want to ask into bits and pieces or prerequisites to see where the misconceptions lie. So here would be an example. So you could ask something like this. What is the central message that the author is trying to tell us in this text or within this text? So then I would break it down into, or if a student got it wrong, I would break it down into, what is something in the text that you would determine to be important to the story? Okay. And then if a student still can't get it, then I would move in here. This would be the bottom portion of that triangle. I would ask, do you think blank, and I would insert a piece of the text there. Do you think blank would be an important fact or an interesting fact? So you can see my whole goal here is to try to pinpoint main idea. So I've asked the main idea, but I've asked it in a different way. I've asked for, central message. And instead, I didn't move on to another student. I instead broke it down into a prerequisite of main idea that I know many students struggle with, which is determining importance. So instead of moving on, I've asked them a determining importance question. And then if they can't get that right, because it was still very open-ended, now I've made it more of a closed question. I've given them a piece of information from the text, and I'm asking them if it's important or interesting to see if they can determine whether or not this one piece of text is important to the overall piece of the story. So now it's less open, more closed, but I'm pinpointing a problem. And it's okay to have more of a closed question, worded more this way, not multiple choice. I try to steer away from multiple choice, but more worded like that to give them an opportunity to see, do we need to work on determining importance with this child? But we are ready for number 5. When it comes to identifying students' needs, this is a big one. So I present the question to you, I guess, conference or assessment? Which one do you think is better for identifying your students' needs, conferencing with them, or giving them a paper pencil assessment. I think there's validity in both. I think there's a time and place for both. But even the best written assessments, paper pencil assessments, can only go so far. They really can. So they are very black and white. Yes, they may ask open-ended questions, which I truly hope they do, but they're very black and white. They ask a very limited number of questions. There's only, 8, there's only 5, there's only 10, whatever that number is. They don't go beyond the question to really dig deeper into the thinking behind it. So if we truly want to know what our students are thinking and what got them to that thinking, and can they take their thinking outside of the pages of the text and bring it into their own world, which is where true critical thinking lies, then we're not going to get there with a paper pencil assessment. We're going to get there with having conferences with our students. So this doesn't mean that you have to have a conference with every kid for every text that they read. Nobody has time for that. But it does mean that I need to try to have a balance in the way that I assess my students. Maybe I want to have a paper pencil assessment, but also make sure that I'm conferencing with my students weekly, whether it be in guided reading groups, strategy groups, whatever. That way I can have multiple data points so I can see where they're struggling paper pencil, but also where they're struggling, when I have a conversation with them about a text. All right, we're ready for our final tip when it comes to identifying students' needs, and that is to analyze questions. So a lot of times we don't get a say in what the assessments look like for our students. We are given assessments from the district. We're given assessments from our curriculum. Maybe you do have the ability to create your own assessments. And if so, I think that's amazing. But for many of us, that's not the case. So this is a big step for helping identify our students' needs that has to be done when we are given the assessments from higher up. So if we have to do those paper pencil assessments, analyzing the questions that are on those assessments is a must. So when we give assessments, do we really understand and that's the big question, what the questions are truly asking? Do we know what skills are being assessed? And do we know how those skills are important to the comprehension of the text? So there's a lot that goes into making strong assessments and making assessments that really match the kind of thinking that's needed when you read a text. You don't use every single reading skill every single time you read every single text. It doesn't happen. So what kind of thinking is needed to understand this text? And then how do the questions in those assessments support that thinking? So here's why I think it's important as teachers that we analyze those questions. If we read the story, if we read the questions and analyze them, and we can see that maybe question number 3 and number 7 really have no merit to that story whatsoever, take them out. Don't grade them. Or let them answer them and then just use that data, at another time. But don't penalize the students for getting those questions wrong when in reality, the story really didn't give a lot of support or thinking to those types of questions. So there goes a lot into that. So I think that taking the time to read our assessment stories, analyze the questions that are there, to figure out what's worthy to stay and, maybe change a question or two if needed, if you have, the ability to do that. That could be something that you could easily do to make the assessment worthwhile. That's the whole point of it. Make the assessment worthwhile for your students' time, for your time, to give you data that's going to further your instruction to help your students move. If it's not going to do that, then don't waste your time. I hope that you got some great things to think about, some great little tips and tricks that really don't take a lot of time and effort, but just things that we can really do to hone in on what we do, what we say, why we say it, and what actions and things that we give our students to make it beneficial for them and for you. If you have any questions about what we talked about tonight, make sure to leave them in the comments below if you haven't done so already, and I'll be happy to answer them. And I thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to check out my other videos. I have tons of them over on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ciera Harris Teaching. And there'll be tons of others over there if you like what you saw tonight. So come and join me over on YouTube. And I will talk to you all next week. Thanks so much. Bye.